Fox News alert on devastating new polls for the president and the Democrat Party. They show a majority of Americans no longer believe in the promises of a Biden presidency, questioning his knowledge, competence, and stability in tough times, and saying the country is on the wrong track. You think? This is Outnumbered. I'm Kayleigh McEnany. I'm joined today by my co-host Harris Faulkner and Emily Compagno, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy, and in the center virtual seat, Washington Times opinion editor and Fox News contributor, Charlie Hurt. Happy Monday, everyone. The president's job approval ratings pretty much tanking since he took office. And right now, in a new NBC poll, more than a majority, 54%, disapprove of the job he's doing. Even worse, another poll finds 71% of Americans say the country is heading in the wrong direction. But the president doesn't seem all that concerned about those dismal numbers. Check it out.
The polls are going to go up and down and up and down. They were high early, then they got medium, then went back up, and now they're low. Well, look, this is look at every other president. The same thing has happened. But that's not why I ran. I didn't run to determine how well I'm going to do in the polls.
Presumably, Charlie, he ran to please the majority of the American people on the things he's delivering. He's clearly not doing that. 54% disapprove. Charlie, I dug through the poll this morning. Interestingly, on the economy, when asked how Biden's doing, he used to have a 9-point advantage. He's now underwater by 17 points on the issue that is always of top concern to voters. Interesting.
Yeah, it really is. It's amazing how much goodwill he's managed to burn through so quickly. The last time Democrats faced numbers like this was back in 2009, 2010, after Barack Obama got elected. And the big difference between then and now is that while obviously there were a lot of voters who didn't like Barack Obama, there were a lot of people who loved President Obama, and their love for him never waned. And the difference here is that clearly people are fleeing from Biden. And then you look around the country, and whether it's the border or crime, and of course, issues like crime and inflation and gas prices, those are really close to home pocketbook issues. Those aren't sort of minor issues like academic issues for people. Those are issues people feel. And then, of course, as you all remember, the entire election that Joe Biden ran was this promise, this dishonest promise that he was going to cure COVID. And of course, he has failed in that department too. So it's a real bad situation Democrats find themselves in right now.
No doubt about it. I totally agree with you. This was never about a love for a guy hiding in a basement that we barely saw during a campaign. I think that's been made clear. Not only that, Emily, really interesting. I saw this over the weekend. It was just eye-opening. It's not just disapproval of Biden, but it's almost as if on issue by issue, you're seeing support for the Republican Party and their stance. We'll pop it up. Here on border security, Republicans plus 27. Controlling inflation on who you trust, Republicans plus 24. Dealing with crime, plus 22. Republicans, national security, plus 21 Republicans, the economy, plus 18 Republicans, getting things done, plus 13. That economy number in particular, Emily, Josh Kraushaar pointing out, that's the highest advantage Republicans have had since 1991 on the economy.
I mean, honestly, it's mind-blowing, but it's not surprising at all, right? I keep saying this on the couch here because what Americans care about are reflected in those numbers. To Charlie's point about it being kitchen table issues, these aren't academic. These are what we feel. We care about affording the heat in our home. We care about how far our dollar goes. We care about limited taxes, limited government, a strong dollar, strong national security, keeping drugs off of the streets, and our kids being able to learn and flourish in schools. All of these are things that ordinary Americans care about deeply. And so no wonder the hallmark of this presidency, which is sort of an antipathy and absolutely getting the tone right, no wonder it's being reflected now in the reasonable Democrats seeing exactly who in these policies, how they stand for, would thrive in the polls. And quick final point, one of the Democratic pollsters who ran this poll said what Americans voted for was stability and calm, and instead what they got was instability and chaos.
You hit the key point there, because look, the issues he's underwater on, he says he doesn't look at polling. I believe he does. Every politician does. And you predicted, Harris, that he would say, I'm not looking at the polls. You were right.
He may
said
not
just
be
that.
being shown the polls. I mean, he has also said that. I mean, it's somebody's job to prepare him to take questions. I don't know, but what we do know is in Glasgow, he said, I've been instructed to blah, 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 yet again. Look, it's not a crime or anything or uncommon to get the list of reporters in the room. But when you've been instructed to do something and then you actually articulate that is a trend line that maybe doesn't help you in the category of strength. And isn't that what we're talking about when you drill down into these numbers for this polling? It shows that people don't feel like this president can handle a crisis above 50% of them. And it's a healthy number of Democrats in this polling, so we've been told. And you can read down and drill into it and see these kitchen table issues that Charlie and Emily have talked about affect everybody. But the idea that a person is not ready to handle a crisis when you have several crises going on simultaneously, that's problematic. One more thing, too, with regard to something you brought up. Are we seeing a shift for Democrats away, and maybe this will have an effect on all of politics going forward? I don't know. Not in a good way for the Democrats, I would say. The cult of personality politics now. You know, Trump had a Trump base. Obama had an Obama base. Charlie, that's what you talked about. Those people who loved him no matter what. Biden doesn't seem to have one because 22% would not be enough to consider that as a Biden base. Just pointing that out. That means that they don't love him.
Yeah. It's a great point. I don't think he has a strong base. I think that's clear from this polling. And Harris brings up a good point. You know, there's this general sense of incompetence in the country, and this polling reflects it. It's not just we don't trust you on crime. It's we don't think you're competent to handle the issues, the crises. Kennedy, and then this number, if I'm Joe Biden sitting in the White House, this number says a lot to me. When they were asked about the future of America, 41% of respondents said they think the country's best years are still ahead. 53% saying America's best years are behind us. When you feel we've left the most positive thing in this country in the past and not in the future, whoa, you may not be paying attention, Joe, but maybe you should start.
Yeah, that and the competency number, I think, are two things that really hurt him. I actually disagree with that. I mean, I still and will always believe in America. I believe that people here want it to be an incredible country, and I believe people here work really hard, and they are generally optimistic. It feels like we have a lot working against us right now, but I do think that number may be momentary. But there is obviously a correlation between how people are feeling and how the country is doing. And the administration needs to acknowledge that, because if you just pretend that poll numbers don't matter, you're saying that the people who pick up the phone and answer some of those questions, they don't matter. And the people who share their view that things are too expensive and, you know, they're scared about crime rising in their cities. You're saying that those people don't matter if you're not acknowledging. And I think that's one of the biggest issues with this administration is they don't acknowledge problems to begin with. So, yes, the president is having a hard time. His poll numbers are going south. The same thing is happening with his vice president. You know, I look at all of this. I look at this myriad of problems that are unenviable for any administration, and I ask myself, where's the vice president? This was supposed to be essentially a co-presidency, the Biden-Harris administration. So you've got two people who were supposedly ready to lead who are blowing it.
Well, I think that's all the proof you need. And the direction of this presidency is that the vice president has all but disappeared. You know, where is she? She has presidential ambitions. Maybe someone can go find Kamala for us.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.